Hello, welcome back to my channel. So I am coming here today with my second video. It's my second video on creating great characters. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. I know there's been the intro video and the character profile sheet video. If you haven't got your character profile sheet, by the way, you can sign up to my mailing list below and get access to that. I will not spam you. I very rarely email, to be honest, but you can just go ahead and download the profile sheet. But anyway, today's video is going to be talking about your character's misbelief or wound or fatal flaw or whatever you want to call it. So I talk about this in the character profile video. Go and watch that video if you haven't. But this section needs to go more in depth. And the reason for this is very often when we read a book and it stays with us in a way that we are constantly thinking about it, or even a movie that we can't get out of our head, it is because the character's misbelief has been the central thing that has driven the plot to the story, and them going through it is what creates this emotional attachment, because the character's misbelief, which I will call it, so if you call it a wound or a flaw or whatever you want, it's the same thing, but it's this misbelief about themselves, and them interacting with that through the story is what creates such a magnificent in-depth story that us as readers and viewers can fall into and love, because we can understand it. So what is a character's misbelief? Basically, the misbelief is something that the character believes about themselves that dictates how they maneuver through the world, through your story, and through your plot. So when we say misbelief or wound, you might think that this means that they have to have had a traumatic event in their life, and that's not necessarily true. All of us people will interact with the world, with our jobs, with other people in our lives, with relationships, with how we make decisions based on our beliefs of the world. And whatever kind of childhood you had, you could have had the most loving, happy childhood that was filled with rainbows and unicorns and everything that you ever asked for, and still have a misbelief about yourself. And in fact, it could be that very thing that creates a misbelief, because you could take someone who is exceptionally spoilt and given everything, and their misbelief is that they are entitled to everything. Likewise, you could have misbelief that is born of childhood trauma, and it doesn't even have to be an abusive childhood. It could be just a traumatic event. Maybe they experienced bullying, maybe one of their parents died. That is a popular one that I do try to avoid, to be honest, but maybe they saw a parent battling cancer, maybe they were kidnapped. So pretty much whatever misbelief we have as people and your characters have is going to come from their childhood and their past, regardless of what their childhood and past was like. Whether it was a good childhood or a bad childhood, doesn't matter. You're still going to have some kind of belief about the world that determines how you go through life and how your characters go through plot. And you might be wondering why you need to have a misbelief, but you can have a story and it can be a fantastic story. Say you thought of a plot of a story, but you didn't have an actual character for it. So you just know character's going to start at point A and is going to end up at point Z. But how they travel through every other letter is actually going to be determined by who they are as a person, and who they are comes back to the misbelief. So you probably know by now, I love the world of Breaking Bad. You might also know that I love Harry Potter. And so I'm just going to use those examples. If you don't know either of those stories, Harry Potter is basically a young boy who discovers he's actually a wizard and ends up in this new world and learns how to be a wizard. Breaking Bad is about a mild-mannered teacher who discovers he's got lung cancer and wants to make his family financially stable for after his death, and becomes one of the most wanted drug lords in America through the series. So that's basically the two different stories. Now, if you were to take Harry Potter, grown-up Harry Potter, not the child, and put him into Breaking Bad, so get rid of Walter White, it's Harry Potter, the man, he's in his 50s now, and Harry Potter finds out he has lung cancer and he's going to die, and he's got a wife and children, and because he's the breadwinner of the family, he needs to make sure that they're going to be financially stable after his death for many years to come. The way Harry Potter would go about getting that financial stability, because he's not got a lot of time, so he's got to be something quick, is completely different to the way Walter White does it. Harry Potter is not going to come and be the biggest drug lord in America. So you can have literally the same story, but you change the character and their beliefs about the world and who they are, and you change the entire story that gets them from diagnosed with lung cancer, financial stability at the end of the story. That whole path is going to be totally different. I hope that makes sense. Now we understand what a misbelief is, or a wound, or a flaw. How do you discover what your character's is? So the key to finding your character's misbelief is to go to their backstory and their past and their history and search for it in there, because that is where it will be. That is where my misbelief about the world is, and that is where your misbelief about the world is. Because we are shaped as children. That's just a fact. From the age, I don't know, up to the age of 7, 8, everything we are told from that age is what shapes us in the world. You know, whether you are raised with religious beliefs, anti-religious beliefs, who you are as an adult comes from those very informative years in your life. And it doesn't even have to be that age for your character. So what you have to go back to, what event did they experience that created an emotional reaction? So one of the questions to ask yourself is, what traumatic or emotionally impactful event happened in your character's past, and how did this event change their beliefs and behaviors, and are there any unresolved issues that affect them now? Like I said, it doesn't have to be this massive traumatic, they were kidnapped by murdering people who turned out to be their real parents because they'd been kidnapped and lied to all their lives. To have something like that, but it can be. And so I've recently read Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us, and I'll try not to do any spoilers, but there might be, so if you don't want a spoiler for this book, skip ahead for 30 seconds or so. But basically you've got the male character called Ryle, and he had a traumatic event that happened, I think he was either 6 or 8 in his life, which shapes him who he is now. And he does come to face this, but we learn about his event and talk about it and how that has created who he is now. And this event in his life has made him like a dedicated person who wants to be a neurosurgeon, and that's his laser focus. And he doesn't want relationships, he just wants one night stands, he doesn't want kids, he doesn't want family, he's not interested in any of that because of this event. That's the path he's chosen. Obviously the whole point of the book is going to challenge this thing, but that was Colleen showing he had this event happen, and this made him go through his life in this way to this point when he's in the book. And I have the same thing when I was creating Harper and Ethan in the Death Dealer series, so exploring their backstory and how they got their misbeliefs. So if you haven't read my Death Dealer series, it's totally fine, but basically there's a world of magical, it's an urban fantasy though, so there's normal people and there's people with magic, and the magic isn't like you were born to magical parents. So I've kind of like got it genetically created, kind of like Down syndrome is. It's just one of those things that happens. It's, you know, someone with Down syndrome just has an extra chromosome. It's not really predictive, it just occurs, and a person with Down syndrome is born. It's the same in my stories. Magic just occurs. Someone will randomly have a child that has magic, and so my character Harper is one of these people. She just happens to be born with magic, and some people view this as an amazing thing and others view this as like a disability, and her mother views it as a disability. She is very much make an impression of people, pillar of the community. She cares so much about what people think about her. She has to have everything perfect. She would hate that anybody would think anything negative about her because she has this fake self that she puts out. If you know the kind of person, you know they are very particular, and she wants to put out this image, and to have a child that has magic is like shameful. And it kind of goes like back to the 19th century, you know, if you had someone with mental illness, they were kind of hidden away, and so that's what it was. So to find out her daughter has magic powers is like the end of the world for her. So looking back at Harper's past, I needed the event that created this, whether it was like just the spark of all this stuff. So for Harper, we had her that she was about 6 and she accidentally raised the neighbour's dead dog, and it followed her into the house, which was when her mother, so it was magic. Her mother went crazy. She was like, oh my god, she suddenly just discovered that her daughter has this magic, and how shameful, and what is everyone going to think of her? So she had to hide it. And instead of, because when this happened with Harper, her mother basically had 2 choices. It could be a horrible thing or it could be a good thing, and for Harper's mother the magic was horrible, and so that became a traumatic event for Harper. Harper, because then her mother medicated her to medicate the magic away from her. And even though the magic had been medicated away, it suddenly then downgraded Harper to like this second-rate person in her mother's life, and was treated as such. Not that she was ever abused and she was never neglected, but from then on she was always treated inferior, and her mother always had to have this control of her so that the magic never came out, because it would be a reflection on the mother and there would be the shame. So when you have explored the characters' backstory and where they've come from, what you need to do is write a scene for when this event happened. So for Harp, I would be writing the dog's, not necessarily the dog scene, but her mother's reaction after it, and the scene of maybe when she was taken to the doctor for the medicine and how disgusted her mother was and how shamed she was and how she kind of hid her away. That's the scene I would write. So for you, explore your character's backstory and then write some scenes, and you can write several, it's fine, it's a lot of fun. And just try and get that event that happened for them. The next thing I want you to do when you've explored their backstory is actually identify what the wound itself is, and you will do this through different scenes. So you have the scene, the main scene, but then there are other scenes, because when a character's misbelief is created on that initial event, that one event probably isn't strong enough. It has to be cemented into their life as they grow up, and it has to keep reoccurring for them, because that is how it becomes a very strong misbelief when they are in adulthood. So once you have a clear understanding of your character's past, pinpoint the specific events that caused this emotional wound which caused the misbelief. So if I jump to Ethan in my Death Dealer series, so if you don't know his backstory, basically he's the middle child. He's got an older brother called Dalton and a younger sister called Casey. They're all magical children. He's grown up in a family where magic is accepted. He was very lucky with that. However, his mother is a junkie. She has a series of men. She never has any money because she always spends it on drugs. There's never any food. Kids are kind of neglected a lot. She's got with somebody who is abusive, often uses Ethan as his punching bag when he's come in drunk for the night. And for his event in his backstory, I selected the night his mother decided to leave. So his brother and sister were asleep, and he heard his mother, and she came in and she took the money boxes out and he heard them emptying. So he went to ask what she was doing, discovered his mother and the boyfriend were packing up, and realised that they were leaving. So that was the event. So he kind of like, he was only like 11, 12 at the time of this happening. Asked his mother what she was doing, and then she like laid into him, it's his fault, you've ruined my life, blah blah blah, I'm leaving, I'm going off for a better life, you three can stay here. Because the problem is actually his older brother is what's called magically insane. So like I said, the magic happens like how Down syndrome happens. Like, don't jump on me for comparing it to real world conditions, but it's kind of how they worked in my brain. So when someone has too much magic, it's kind of like being on the autism spectrum. And very often a person who has autism faces a lot of challenges because the world is not built for them, and they can end up in institutions, they need help. And so it is the same for Ethan's brother Dalton. His magic is too strong, which is like the equivalent of having autism. And so he needs a lot more care than Ethan, and he needs help because the world is not built for him and the magic that he has, because it's just too much. And so for a drunky mother who's already neglecting her kid to have a child with special needs, it's even worse. And so she feels it's ruined her life. She blames the kids. She's leaving. The boyfriend's talked her into it. We're just going to dump these kids, start a new life. He's already violent anyway. And so when Ethan finds her leaving, and it gets into a bit of a thing, she lays into him, tells him how they've ruined her life, she's not being there anymore for them to destroy her life any further, she's going for a better life, basically is absolutely awful to him. He ends up a bit of physical abuse from the stepfather who hits him and, you know, scares him because he's only a kid, and he has to basically watch his mother leave and dump him. So that is his wound. His wound comes from his mother, who has told him that all of this is their fault, it's his fault, he doesn't help her enough, he's useless, he doesn't help look after the sister, he's always setting his brother off on these things, and she's just had enough. So she leaves. So that's how I identify his wound. So the next step is to determine their misbelief. And when I say this, what I mean is think about how your character has interpreted or misunderstood the past event. What false perception or belief did they develop as a result of this event? So Ethan's mother left, and like I said, you need more than one scene because these things get cemented. So she was already told him that this is his fault, and then instead of going toward the authorities to say that, hey, I've been left alone and I've got my brother who's like 15 and my sister who's like 9 and like he's pre-teen teenager himself, he decides to take on the role of looking after them. He gets his little sister to school, he sets up the house so that he can care for his brother. He goes to school himself, he goes and gets tries to get his part-time job. He also starts to steal because he has to feed his brother and sister, because his brother might be older but he can't do that and the sister's little, so he takes it upon himself to care for them, and he fails because he's only a child, and he's suddenly been given this big responsibility of being a parent to his siblings, that it all keeps going wrong. And in his head he's got his mother's voice telling him it's all his fault. So when things go wrong in the future, when he's trying to look after his brother, when he's trying to care for his sister, he always has this feeling of it's going wrong because he's not good enough and it's his fault. So all these events that happen, like when his brother has episodes, or the sister is not coping, or there's no food, he takes that responsibility himself and blames it on himself and internalizes this, that he's not good enough, he's a failure, and he can't look after the people he loves in his life, instead of actually knowing that it's actually his mother who is to blame here, and he's just a kid and he should not have these responsibilities. So this is what you need on when you are developing your character's misbelief. Determine the misbelief and how this event creates their misbelief. And another example of this is you could have the misbelief that money will buy you happiness, and this could be rooted in a childhood that was strife with poverty, and maybe this family was always hiding from the landlord and they never had any money, there was never enough food on the table, and maybe the mum and dad worked all the time and the kids had to kind of fend for themselves, and they were only ever happy when they had a lot of money in the house because their parents were very money focused. And so this kid has grown up into an adult to believe that the only way to get happiness is to get lots of money. So the story would have to challenge that belief about them. So if you see what I mean, you need to determine your misbelief and dig into their past and these events and how this perception was developed through the events. The other one is to consider the consequences of your character's misbelief. So how does the misbelief affect your character's current actions, decisions and relationships? And the misbelief often drives a character's motivation and creates the internal conflict that all stories need. So go back to Ethan, as we go through his life, through his backstory, his brother ends up in an institute because Ethan fails to look after him, and also his sister's gone missing, and basically I think Ethan was about 19, he had an argument with his sister, she stormed out and then she vanished and he's not been able to find her. So because he's right from being a kid, when his mother left, he had this belief that it's all his fault and he ruins everyone's life, and then these bad things happen to his siblings, he also takes that on. And now when we meet him in Dead on Arrival and the first books of the series, he's very closed off to people. He does not allow close relationship. He still has like a very helpful kind of personality because that's just him, but he now firmly believes that his presence in another person's life is toxic, that he is going to cause them harm, he is going to cause their lives to go wrong, and anything that happens in their lives is going to be his fault because there's something wrong with him, he's worthless. And so to prevent that, he doesn't let people get close to him, he doesn't say what he wants, and he kind of keeps himself to himself. And it's not that he's a weak character or anything like that, because he's a bounty hunter, he's fully embraced his magic, he's good at being a bounty hunter for the Mages Council, but he's also, he's very strong, he keeps people out he's made himself very strong because he's self-reliant, because he does not want anybody in his life that he has to rely on or they have to rely on him. I hope you see what I mean on that one too. And the other part of this, with considering the consequences, is sometimes the misbelief can often lead to self-sabotage. So think about how the character's misbelief might make them self-sabotage. So you could have a character who is in university and going to become a doctor, but they feel worthless and useless and stupid, and maybe that's what they've been told all their lives. So when it comes to their finals, they faff, they don't study, and they actually fail their PhD exam, not because they couldn't do them, but because their limiting self-belief had them sabotaging their own success. So this is another great way of having the misbelief work in your story. How does the misbelief make your character sabotage their own story and create obstacles for them to achieve their goals. Next point is showing your character's growth. So as your character progresses, the character should have the opportunity to face their misbelief and the wound and potentially overcome it. And this can be a powerful character arc development. And you need to consider how the character's relationships and experiences challenge their misbelief and lead them to personal growth. So if we jump to Ethan and Harper again, little backstory. So Harper is a magical, but she's unregistered because her magic's been hidden, which magical's fine in the world, but they have to be registered. Ethan is a bounty hunter, and if he is sent out to arrest unregistered magicals, that's his thing. He's a bounty hunter. And so in the book Dead on Time, which is a novella, he meets Harper and realizes she's an unregistered magical, and for whatever reason he does not take her in to face charges for what she's done. He decides to try to help her and stop her getting arrested, as it was. So when he meets Harper, she's already this downtrodden person with the crappy boyfriend, hiding her magic, feeling ashamed of it, not really being herself. She's just kind of like going through life, just begging for breadcrumbs off people she really should tell to get lost. The only lovely person she has in her life is her best friend, who doesn't know she's magic but accepts her regardless. And so when Ethan comes into her life, he tries to get her to face that she's this magical person, has this magic, should I say. She's in complete denial. She won't accept it. She refuses to use her magic. However, because she is poor, she lives in a flat, she works in a morgue, she's just like normal person, she can't afford the medication that keeps her magic suppressed, so she doesn't take it properly. She skips and tries to coast through it. Because of this, her magic starts to come out, which is how Ethan has spotted her, and he tries to teach her that being a magical is nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it's actually the opposite. It's wonderful, it's powerful. And as the stories progress and we go through the book, she's going to learn so much about herself, where her magic comes from, what it means in the grand scheme of the world, and how she is not worthless as her mother has told her, and how she deserves everything and not the scraps that people throw her. She's not a doormat. Now, ironically, I've got a few negative reviews on this book that say Harper's weak and is a doormat, and I'm like, well, good, because that's what she's supposed to be at the beginning, because we're at the start of her character arc. So I'll take your negative review and see that I wrote the character correctly. But anyway, so that's just a side note. But your character can grow through their misbelief, and while Ethan is helping Harper, he's also going to face his own misbeliefs, because obviously he has this misbelief that he's toxic and he doesn't let anyone in, but he does start to let Harper in, and him helping her to have her character arc is going to unravel him and let him have his character arc. Lastly, use the wound or the misbelief as narrative for your story. So as I said right at the beginning of this, you can have a story, you can have a plot. The story will change based on the character that you have in it, and this is where that comes in. So if you incorporate your character's wound or misbelief into your story and plot and all the character interactions, these elements will drive the conflict. They will create the emotional tension, and they will just add so much depth to your character's journey through the story you are trying to tell. And by going through all these steps to create your character's misbelief, you will be able to create compelling and relatable characters, because we all have misbeliefs and we all interact with the world, with each other, based on the things that shape us, and that's what makes us interesting and different from each other, and that is what will make your characters interesting and different from each other. You used to go away, think of your favorite character in a book or a film or a TV series, and look at what their misbelief is, and what you will find is the story has probably focused a lot on their misbelief and wounds without ever directly saying it, but because you can feel this misbelief about themselves and how they travel through it through the story, you get connected to them. So by following these steps, hopefully you can uncover your character's wound and misbelief, which will help you create compelling and relatable characters with rich internal lives. And these elements can serve for a foundation of character development and storytelling in your novel. So go and find your favorite character in a book, story, film, it doesn't matter. Go and look at them and study it. Just go and study it, and you will find that it is the character's misbelief and wound and that intertwining with the story that is what has helped you connect to the person, because everybody has a wound or a misbelief that's come from somewhere. So just quickly recap on the points. Point number 1, Go and explore your character's backstory. Their misbelief is rooted in there. Write some scenes, write the main scene, and then write some scenes that cemented it. And you can jump through timelines, years, doesn't matter. Go and write some scenes from your character's backstory to find the events that cause their misbelief. Identify what their wound is that has given them this misbelief. What event or events have caused this emotional pain in them. Determine their misbelief. What false belief or perception did they have as a result of the wound that was caused to them? Consider the consequences of their wound and misbelief. How does their misbelief affect your character's current actions, relationships, and decisions that they make? The next one, show your character's growth. How do they grow through the story with this misbelief, either confronting it or getting on the path to confront it? And then use the wound as the narrative for your story. So whatever your story is, have your characters interact through your story with that misbelief and wound intertwined with the story, plots, beats, whatever you want to call them, for such a richer story that has characters that your readers can connect with. And that's it. So I hope that helped you to understand how to find your character's misbelief, but also how to use it and to pull it to the surface. And I absolutely love this part of character creation, and I used to think that this is a waste of time, like I'm wasting writing time by creating backstory that I'm not going to write into the story. But actually, the more you know your character, the more you know where they've come from, what they've faced and what they've dealt with, the better that you can write them and put them down on the page. And it might even be that you don't know these things until you've written the first draft of your story. It was certainly the case for Ethan that we uncovered things as we were writing Dead on Arrival, and then we've gone back and created his backstory. But have fun, go and just have a creative journey with this and delve into your character's backstory and explore who they are, and have like I said, just have some fun with it. But I am going to head off. I will be back with another video on creating characters. I hope this has helped. If it has, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to smash that notification bell so that you get notified every time I post a new video. Before I go though, like I said, it's down below, sign up to my mailing list. I don't spam, I don't really send any newsletters out. I might post that I've got a new video, but it will give you access to my profile sheet and anything else I ever put out, workbooks, whatever, because obviously as I record this it's September, which means I'm getting ready for Preptober, which means there's going to be a Preptober workbook for NaNoWriMo in November, and by signing up you will get that for free. I also have a Facebook group. There's not very many people in it, it's just little, so help me grow it. I would really love for you to be there. It's basically just a group where we can be accountable to each other. I put up an accountability post so you can talk about your goals, what went wrong, what went right, what you might need some help with, and just supporting each other through this indie journey. So I will also link that group down below, and I hope you come along and join us. And that's it for me. So I will see you next video. Thanks for watching.